When finest aspirations fail. When finest aspirations fail and dreams become dismay, and all the hopes tomorrow held lie felled by yesterday. What can we do? Where do we turn? What can we say? We hurt for what has happened, and we fear for what's to come, and easy consolation leaves us negative and numb, and wondering whether deeper depths are yet to plumb. Shall they control our destiny, who deaf to our demands, are ruled by other values and differ to their commands? And are our future saves in these unwanted hands? O Christ, you lost control, or it seems, where to tree they nailed you and regaled you, and refused to set you free, and all because you showed how life was meant to be. Then must our hopes, like you, be broken down beyond repair, and must we be lost and powerless, befriended by despair, in order somehow to be saved, and sense God's care? And shall our hopes, like you, arise from where they cease to be? And shall the spirit that was crushed be transferred and set free? If that's God's will, then we wait what's yet to be.
You've heard reflections about Good Friday, the day of darkness, of death, and complete loss for the followers of Christ. Yet to come are reflections on Easter Sunday, the most important day in the Christian calendar, the event upon which all Christianity is built, the day of light. But I'm here to talk about Easter Saturday, the time in between. In many ways, it's a forgotten day of Holy Week. It's called the liminal time. Liminal refers to a period of transition, where the past way of doing things, of living, has gone, and nothing yet has taken its place. In liminal times, everything is unsettled and awkward, and most of us feel tremendous unrest and a sense of urgency. I can't even imagine what this would have meant to the disciples and other followers of Christ. They had given up everything to follow Jesus, yet he seemed powerless as he fell from the celebration of Palm Sunday to being betrayed, tried, mocked, crucified, dead, and buried. A long way from being crowned King of Kings. They must have had deep doubts about their sacrifices, their beliefs, and their faith. On Saturday, their assumptions of the past were gone, and yet there was nothing certain about the future, except perhaps for vague hope. Liminality is the quality of ambiguity or disorientation that occurs in the middle stage of a passage. And is there anything that better describes life in 2021 as ambiguity, uncertainty, and disorientation? Easter Saturday is an apt metaphor for our lives in COVID-19 reality in April 2021. About 4 years ago, I had an experience that helped remind me of the greatest lesson for living in liminal times, and by extension, something that I think about during COVID-19. Back then, I was presenting at a conference in the Netherlands. At the end of the conference, my wife and I spent an evening out with my co-presenter, the head of web school in LA, named Taylor Stockdale. We got to really like each other, and Taylor invited my wife and me to visit his hometown, San Diego, where he would be pleased to show us around, including the famous, huge US Naval Base. That sparked something in my memory, and I asked him whether he was related to Admiral Stockdale. Admiral Stockdale was well known in the early 1990s when he was vice presidential candidate running with Ross Perot against George Bush Sr. and Bill Clinton. Perhaps I should have said that Admiral Stockdale was notorious because he had a very difficult time with the vice presidential debate and became the butt of many jokes by every comedian, including the late night hosts and Saturday Night Live. He was portrayed as a doddery, mixed up old man. Taylor was perhaps surprised that a Canadian knew about his father and offered that the election really wasn't his finest hour. He had absolutely no interest in running for any public office, but he did it out of a sense of duty and loyalty to Ross Perot. Taylor then started to tell me about his father's story, and it's remarkable. Stockdale left his family when Taylor was just a toddler to see action as a pilot in what we call the Vietnam War, but what in Vietnam is known as the American War. He was shot down and spent 7.5 years as a prisoner of war in the terrible and notorious Hoa Lo prison, or the Hanoi Hilton, as the Americans called it. I visited it a couple of years ago and learned that for its first 70 years or so, during the French colonial times, it was used as an inhuman, overcrowded prison for political prisoners and had a working guillotine. During the war, it was used to house American Navy and Air Force prisoners. Stockdale was the senior naval officer there for 7.5 years, repeatedly declining the opportunity to be part of prisoner exchanges unless the men under his command were also included. Over this period, while he headed the prisoners' resistance, he underwent repeated torture, among other things having his shoulders dislocated, his leg broken at least twice, and being placed in solitary confinement for 4 years in a windowless concrete cell measuring less than 1 meter by about 2.5 meters, with a light bulb that was always on. Many of his fellow prisoners were killed or simply could not survive the horrors. In telling his father's story, Taylor pulled out this photograph from his wallet, which showed him and his family greeting their father for the first time in 9 years. Taylor is the youngest in the foreground with his head buried in his father's arm. Believe it or not, the hunched over old man in this photo weighed less than 100 pounds, could barely walk, and was still in his 40s. So how did he survive when so many others didn't? The answer has become famous and is now known as the Stockdale Paradox, made internationally famous by Jim Collins in one of the seminal books on leadership of the last 25 years, Good to Great. When asked why some never made it out, Stockdale responded, "Oh, that's easy, the optimists. Oh, they were the ones who said, we're going to be out by Christmas," and Christmas would come and Christmas would go. Then they'd say, we're going to be out by Easter, and Easter would come and Easter would go, and then Thanksgiving, and then it would be Christmas again. And they died of a broken heart. This is a very important lesson. He continued, and this is the Stockdale Paradox. You must never confuse faith that you will prevail in the end, which you can never afford to lose, with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality, whatever they may be. This is a powerful message, especially for April 2021. While we have the bright light in the future that vaccines promise, the third wave, the raging infection counts, and the increased hospitalizations, including of young people, means that we cannot let our optimism, our faith that things will be getting better, get in the way of responsibly managing our current dangerous realities. I had 2 takeaways from this story. Number 1, there is usually a deeper truth to what we see, whether it is the depth and immense character of James Stockdale rather than the mixed up old man from a television debate, or appreciating the full history of Hua Lo Prison rather than just its final 10 years. We need to remind ourselves in a 280 character, 15-second video clip world of the value of curiosity and the need to dig deeper in order to better understand truth. And number 2, most importantly, our situation here today is nothing close to the shattering grief of the disciples or the brutal 7.5 years that Stockdale spent in the Hanoi Hilton. But whenever we face huge life problems, including those in 2021, we can take inspiration from their examples and their ability to keep the faith that the future will indeed eventually bring relief, while at the same time having the discipline to deal with our challenging circumstances today. Let that be our guide during these liminal times, like those of Easter Saturday.